This diagram depicts the syntax rules of XML document. The syntax rules are very simple and logical. Let's take each component of the diagram in detail. The first one is XML declaration or XML prologue. XML prologue is optional. If it exists, it must come first in the document. It must begin with this angle bracket, question mark, XML, where XML is written in lowercase. This declaration contains details that prepare an XML processor to parse the XML document. There are three parameters, as you can see: version, encoding, and standalone, where version specifies the version of the standard used. Encoding, it defines the character encoding used in the document. UTF-8 is the default encoding used. Why is ASCII not used? Because ASCII used 7 bits for character. It could only represent 128 characters. The biggest weakness with ASCII was that it excluded English letters, but XML document can contain international characters. So to avoid errors, you should specify the encoding used or save your XML file as UTF-8. Okay. Next parameter is standalone. It informs the parser whether the document relies on the information from an external source. Okay. The default value for the standalone is no. Setting it to yes tells the processor that there are no external declarations required for parsing the document. Next, parameter ordering is important. Yes, the order of placing the parameters is important. The correct order is version, encoding, and standalone. No end tag for this. Okay, the XML prologue does not have a closing tag. This is not an error because the prologue is not a part of XML document. Tags and elements. The first one is root element. Every XML file should have one root element to avoid errors. All other elements must be within this root element. This is an example of invalid document because it doesn't have a root element. This is valid because it has a root element. Product is the root element here. And a root element can have child elements and sub-child elements. Case sensitive. Let's see an example of an invalid element. Here, this one is invalid because the first letter of the closing tag is in capital, while the first letter of the opening tag is in small. A valid example would be this, as both the tags are in small case. Next, closing tag. It is illegal to omit a closing tag. All elements must have a closing tag. This one is invalid because it doesn't have a closing tag. Valid examples would be this. See, product ID has got a closing tag. And if there is no content, you can just put a slash and close the bracket. All elements must be properly nested and should not overlap. This is an example of invalid element because it is not nested properly, whereas this is valid because the bold tag is opened inside the product price and closed within product price, so it is nested properly. Next, attributes. XML attributes will have two parts. One is name and other is its value. It resides inside the opening of an XML element. If you can see here, category is equal to HA is an attribute, where category is the name and HA is its value. Attribute values must be within single quote or double quotes, otherwise it will throw an error. Attribute name is written without any quotation. An element can have multiple attributes, but cannot have the same attribute name within the same element. Let us see some invalid examples here. The first one is invalid because the value is not within any quotation. The next one is invalid because it is using the same attribute name twice. If you can see here, cat and cat is used twice, so this is wrong. The last example here, this is also invalid because the name is within double quotes, so which is again wrong.